They left me. My own daughter Sandra and her husband Gabriel walked away without looking back, leaving me in a plastic chair by a fake fern at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. I sat there gripping my carry-on bag, watching them vanish into the crowd, their matching vacation shirts fading like a lie they never meant to keep. 8 hours I waited watching the clock tick family's board flights, and the lounge empty out while I sat like some abandoned suitcase. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. I'm Nancy Carter, 77 years old. This wasn't supposed to be my story. I'd packed 3 days early, laying out every outfit on my bed like I used to for Sandra's school trips. The tickets were for Miami, our big family vacation, as Gabriel called it. He'd pushed for these ridiculous matching t-shirts for me and the kids. Mine said Vacation Grandma in bright yellow letters. I hated it but wore it anyway, because that's what you do when your daughter's husband uses that sharp, impatient tone, like you're too old to get it. At the airport, Sandra kept checking her phone. Gabriel was quieter than usual, and Sophie, their daughter, was lost in her screen, barely glancing up. Something felt off, but I let it slide, because I'd spent years letting things slide for them. At the security line, things got stranger. Sandra laughed when the TSA agent asked about seating, saying, "We'll sort it out later." Nobody looked at me. After we cleared security, Gabriel turned with a forced smile. "Mom, why don't you wait in the lounge? We'll check the bags, sort the kids' boarding passes, and come get you. Just relax." He patted my arm, but it wasn't warm. It was a shove away. I nodded because that's what you do when your family treats you like an inconvenience. I sat by the fern next to a screaming kid and a television stuck on a weather channel. It was 9:15 in the morning. An hour passed, and I watched people rush by with suitcases and coffee. 2 hours in, I paced by the window watching planes take off, wondering if they were on one. By the third hour, I asked the lounge clerk to page Sandra. No answer. My stomach nodded, but I kept waiting because hope doesn't quit easy. By the fourth hour, I stopped checking the entrance. The kid left with his mom and the television switched to ads. I stayed glued to that chair, holding my bag like it was all I had left. At 5 o'clock, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked to the front desk, my legs stiff, and gave the clerk Sandra's name. She typed for a moment, then looked at me carefully. "Ma'am, they checked into the 1:45 flight to Miami. It's gone." I asked her to repeat it. She did, her voice gentle but clear. "They'd boarded without me. Not an accident, not a mix-up." I knew Sandra. She planned everything down to the minute. This was on purpose. I walked to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and sat on the closed lid. I didn't cry because I didn't have it in me. I just needed a place where nobody would ask if I was okay. When I came out, the airport was quieter, the evening crowd thinner. I stood in front of the departure board scanning the list like I was picking a meal at a diner. Then I saw it, Asheville, North Carolina, 7:35 p.m. I don't know why Asheville. Maybe because it was far from Miami. Maybe because I'd visited once with my husband David and remembered the mountains. Maybe because it was anywhere but here. I walked to the ticket counter, my steps firm. "One ticket to Asheville," I said. "Tonight." The agent, a young woman with a tight ponytail, paused. "Round trip, one way." I pulled out my card from the account I'd kept secret since before Sandra's wedding. The one she and Gabriel didn't know about. It had just enough for the fare, a motel, and maybe a week's groceries. I didn't need more. I turned off my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Of course not. They'd made their move. Boarding was quiet. Nobody asked why a woman my age was traveling alone. Nobody noticed I'd ripped off that yellow t-shirt and stuffed it in a trash can by the gate. On the plane, I watched Phoenix's lights fade below me. 8 hours ago, I thought I was headed to Miami with my family. Now I was flying to a place I barely knew because the people I'd raised had left me behind. The plane hummed and I felt something spark, not anger, not yet, but a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I landed in Asheville just after 10. The airport was small, almost calm compared to Phoenix. I walked through the terminal, my carry-on dragging behind me. The air outside was cool and damp, like rain had just passed, and it smelled of pine and wet pavement. I stood under the awning for a moment, breathing it in. Nobody was waiting for me, and for the first time that felt like a gift. I sat on a bench, my old leather bag at my feet, the one David gave me for our 25th anniversary. Sandra had mocked it, called it old-fashioned, but I held it tighter now. I pulled out my wallet. 2 cards, 1 ID, $76 in cash, and a folded slip of paper with an address I hadn't thought about in years, 1423 Maple Lane, my first apartment with David. I didn't know if it still stood, but I'd written it down before leaving like some part of me knew I'd need it. I called a cab. The driver, a quiet man in his 50s, didn't ask questions. I gave him the address of a budget motel I'd found online. When we arrived, I paid in cash, took my key, and climbed the creaky stairs to room 204. The room was simple, 1 bed, 1 chair, a television bolted to the wall. The carpet smelled faintly of cleaner and old stories. I washed my face in the sink and lay down still in my clothes. The blanket was rough, but I didn't care. I slept hard, new dreams, new interruptions. When I woke, morning light slipped through the blinds. Outside, a woman in a blue coat walked her dog slow and steady, like she had nowhere to be. I made coffee in the cheap machine on the nightstand and sipped it from a paper cup. It tasted like cardboard, but it was mine. I didn't turn on my phone. I didn't want to know if they'd noticed I was gone. For years my life had belonged to Sandra, to Gabriel, to their kids, to every errand and obligation they dumped on me. Now, for the first time in decades, my time was my own. I left the motel at 9, my bag over my shoulder, and walked into Asheville's downtown. My hip ached a little, but I kept going. The streets were lined with small shops and cafes, their signs bright against the gray sky. I stopped at a bakery on a corner, the kind with a bell that jingles when you walk in. The woman behind the counter, maybe 40, with flour on her apron, smiled at me. "You're not local, are you?" she asked, as I paid for a blueberry muffin with exact change. "I used to be a long time ago," I said. "Welcome back then." Her words felt warm, not pitying. I asked about housing listings, and she pointed to a bulletin board by the door. Flyers for dog walking, guitar lessons, a used couch for sale. One caught my eye, room for rent, quiet lady preferred private room, shared kitchen, $400 a month, call Maggie. I took a picture of the number and walked to a park nearby, sitting on a bench in the sun. At noon I called. The woman who answered had a rough voice, like she'd smoked too many cigarettes. "You the one for the room?" "Yes, I'm 77, clean, no drama." She paused. "No boyfriends?" I laughed. "Not in years." "Come by at 4. 2185 Hill Street. Bring cash for the first week." She hung up before I could say more. I wrote the address on a napkin and spent the afternoon wandering Asheville's streets, passing art galleries and street musicians. By 4 I stood in front of a faded greenhouse with a sagging porch and a wind chime that clinked softly. Maggie Walsh opened the door, a cigarette in one hand, a gray cat at her feet. "You the old lady?" she asked, eyeing me up and down. "Guess so." She stepped aside. "Come in. Let's see if we get along." The house smelled of coffee and something spicy, maybe curry. Books and magazines were stacked on every surface. Maggie led me through a narrow hallway to a small living room where a muted television played a game show. "Rooms upstairs," she said, flicking her cigarette toward a staircase. I followed her up the steps, my hand on the worn banister. The room was small, a single bed, a scratched dresser, a desk with a wobbly chair. But the window was wide, letting in golden afternoon light that made the space feel alive. "It's $400 a month, or $100 a week, cash only," Maggie said. "No guests without warning. I like quiet. You make trouble, you're out." I nodded. "Sounds fair." I pulled 5 $20 bills from my coat pocket and handed them over. She tucked them into her jeans without counting. "You hungry? I could eat." We went downstairs, and she made grilled cheese sandwiches, crispy and golden. We ate at a small table under a buzzing ceiling fan. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer. It was enough to sit there chewing in silence. That night I unpacked my bag, 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my medications, a worn paperback I'd carried for years. I folded everything neatly into the dresser like it mattered. Maybe it did. I lay in bed listening to the house, settle a clock ticking, Maggie's cat scratching at something, the faint hum of a neighbor's television. My phone stayed off. No calls, no texts. I didn't check. For the first time in years I wasn't waiting for anyone. The next morning I woke early, made coffee in Maggie's cluttered kitchen and sat by the window watching the street come alive. A man jogged by with a dog. A delivery truck rumbled past. I felt like I was starting something, not running away. At 8 I walked to the bakery again, and scanned the bulletin board. A new flyer was pinned up. Help wanted, morning shift, corner brew cafe, apply inside. I didn't hesitate. I walked 3 blocks to the cafe, a small place with mismatched tables and a chalkboard menu. A woman in her 30s with a messy bun and a name tag reading Claire was wiping down the counter. You hiring? I asked. She looked up surprised. You want the job? Yes. She called to the back, and a man with a beard came out. You got experience? He asked. I've raised a family, run a house for 50 years and never missed a morning coffee. I can handle this. He shrugged. Trial shift tomorrow, 6 to 11. Show up, you're hired. I nodded and left feeling lighter than I had in days. That night I ironed my one good blouse and went to bed early. Less than a week ago I'd been left in an airport lounge, like a bag nobody wanted. Now I was moving forward one step at a time. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was doing. I walked into Corner Brew Cafe. At 5:45, my blouse pressed, my shoes polished, ready for the trial shift that could change everything. The place was quiet, only the hum of a coffee machine, and the faint smell of burnt toast filling the air. Claire, the owner, handed me an apron without a word, her eyes sizing me up like she wasn't sure I'd last the morning. Keep your hair tied back, no perfume refill cups, before anyone asks, she said, tossing me a rag to wipe down tables. I nodded, tied the apron tight, and got to work. The morning rush hit hard. By 6:30, contractors in dusty boots, nurses fresh off night shifts, and a handful of tourists poured in demanding coffee and breakfast sandwiches. I moved slow but steady, pouring black coffee, wiping sticky syrup off tables, remembering orders like my life depended on it. By 9 I found a rhythm, my hands moving faster than I expected, keeping up with the chaos. A man in a gray jacket, thick glasses, and a quiet smile sat at the counter every day around 9:10, ordering coffee with cream, no sugar. You're new, he said, on my second shift, his voice calm but curious. I'm Nancy, I replied, sliding his cup across the counter. Henry, he said, leaving a $5 bill as a tip. It wasn't much, but it felt like a nod that I belonged. After my shift I walked back to Maggie's house, my feet sore, but the kind of sore that comes from doing something real. She was in the backyard, pulling weeds in a faded shirt that said coffee first, her cigarette dangling as she worked. You get the job, she called out, not looking up. Trial went fine, so yeah, I said. She nodded, tossing a weed into a bucket. Told you, they need people who show up. That night we ate spaghetti from a box, the kind you boil in 5 minutes, and watched a game show with the sound off. Her cat Franklin curled up on the couch between us, his tail flicking like he owned the place. You staying long? Maggie asked, passing me a glass of cheap red wine. Maybe, I said, taking a sip. She grunted. Good enough. No calls, no texts from Sandra or Gabriel, not a single word, and that burned deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd been in Asheville 3 days, sleeping in Maggie's spare room, waking to Franklin, scratching at the door, and still nothing from them. I kept my phone off because I didn't want to check and find nothing, but part of me hoped they'd at least notice I was gone. They didn't. I pushed it down and kept moving, focusing on the small things, folding my clothes in the dresser, learning the cafe's coffee machine, buying a muffin with exact change. But the silence from them was loud, a reminder of how little I'd mattered when they walked away at the airport. A week and a letter came, not from Sandra or Gabriel but from Sophie, my granddaughter. It was in a plain white envelope, her handwriting uneven, like she'd written it in a hurry. Grandma, where are you? I'm worried. Mom and Dad are acting weird, not saying much, but I know something's wrong. Please let me know you're okay. She'd scribbled her phone number at the bottom, a new one I didn't recognize. I read it twice, standing in Maggie's living room, the television flickering in the background. My chest tightened, not with sadness but with something softer, something that felt like a lifeline. I tucked the letter into my dresser drawer, next to my paperback novel. I wasn't ready to call, not yet, but Sophie's words were the first real thing I'd felt from that old life. Work became my anchor. Claire didn't say much, but she started saving me the day's leftover muffins, blueberry or bran, whatever didn't sell. Take these, or they're trash, she said, sliding a paper bag across the counter. I thanked her and ate them for breakfast, saving a few bucks. Henry came every morning, always at 9:10, always in that gray jacket. We started talking more, not deep stuff, but the kind that builds over time, which bakery had the best bread, how the local crows seemed smarter than most people. One day he brought in a photo of his wife who'd passed 5 years ago, a woman with kind eyes and a scarf tied loose. "She made better coffee than this," he said with a half smile, "but you're not bad." I laughed and refilled his cup, no charge. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was close enough. Sandra's email came on a Tuesday. I just finished a shift, my apron still tied when Claire handed me her phone. "You got mail." I opened it and felt my stomach twist. "Nancy, how could you leave like that? You made us worry sick on our vacation." "The kids are upset." "This isn't fair." Not a single word about the airport, not a hint of the 8 hours I sat waiting like a fool. They didn't mention the lounge, the fake fern, or the way Gabriel patted my arm like I was a problem to be shelved. I read it again looking for something real, but it was all blame, all performance. I deleted it, handed the phone back and went to wipe down tables. Claire watched me, her eyebrow raised. "Family stuff?" she asked. "Something like that," I said and kept moving. That night I sat in my room, the window open letting in the cool Asheville air. Sophie's letter was on the desk, her number staring up at me like a question. I thought about calling, but my fingers wouldn't move. Instead, I walked to a corner store down the street, bought a cheap notebook for $3, and started writing. Not to Sandra, not to Gabriel, but to myself. Things I'd forgotten I could do. Pour coffee without spilling, laugh with a stranger, choose a city and call it home. It wasn't a diary, just a list of proof that I was still here, still capable. I filled a page, then tucked the notebook under my pillow. I wasn't ready to forgive them, but I was ready to keep going. Maggie noticed I was quieter that night. We were eating grilled cheese sandwiches, hers burnt on one side, because she never watched the pan. "You okay?" she asked, pushing a plate toward me. "Just thinking," I said. She nodded, didn't press. That was her way, no questions, no fuss, just a plate of food and a grunt that said she'd listen if I wanted to talk. I didn't. I ate the sandwich, the cheese still warm, and went to bed early. The house was quiet except for Franklin's claws on the floorboards and the faint hum of a neighbor's radio. Work kept me steady. By the end of the week, Claire made my job official, handing me a schedule, scribbled on a napkin. "You're on mornings Monday through Friday, 6 to 11, she said. "Pays minimum plus tips, don't expect much." I nodded, took the napkin and folded it into my pocket. My first paycheck came a week later, $74.26. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned with my own hands, not handed to me by Sandra or Gabriel for some errand they didn't want to run. I cashed it at the bank on Main Street, the teller, a young woman named Mari, smiling as she counted out the bills. "First paycheck?" she asked. "In a long time," I said. She handed me the cash, mostly 5s and 1s, and I tucked it into my wallet, feeling a little taller. I used $10 to buy a pair of wool socks from a shop near the cafe, the kind that keep your feet warm even when the floor's cold. With another 5, I bought a crossword book from a used bookstore, the pages yellowed but the puzzles clean. The rest I saved, tucking the bills into an envelope in my dresser. Maggie saw the socks that night as we sat on her porch sipping tea from chipped mugs. "Fancy," she said, smirking. "Only on Fridays," I replied. She laughed, a short bark that made Franklin jump. Sophie's second letter came a few days later. I found it in the mailbox after work, the envelope creased like it had been stuffed in a hurry. "Grandma, I'm still worried. Mom and Dad won't talk about you, but I know they're upset. Please call me. I miss you." Her number was there again, underlined twice. I read it standing in Maggie's hallway, the air smelling of burnt toast from her attempt at breakfast. I folded the letter and added it to the drawer with the first one. I wanted to call, but something held me back, not fear, just a need to keep this new life separate from the old one. At the cafe, Henry started lingering longer after his coffee, telling stories about his old job fixing cars in a shop outside town. "Crows used to steal my tools," he said one morning, his eyes crinkling. "Smart little thieves." I laughed and poured him another cup. Claire noticed but didn't comment, just handed me a rag to clean the counter. The work was hard, my feet ached by noon, but it was honest. I wasn't waiting for anyone to tell me where to sit or what to do. I was moving forward, one shift at a time. Sandra's second email came a week later, sharper than the first. I was wiping down tables when Claire handed me her phone again. Another one. It read, "Nancy, we're worried. You can't just disappear like this. Call us." No apology, no mention of the airport, just more blame like I'd run off for no reason. I deleted it without a word and went back to work. Claire didn't ask, but she slid a muffin across the counter when my shift ended. "Eat something," she said. I took it and nodded, grateful for the quiet kindness. That night I added to my notebook, walked 3 miles without stopping, smiled at a stranger, paid my own way. Small things, but they added up. Maggie was in the living room when I got home, flipping through a magazine with Franklin on her lap. "You look like you're settling in," she said, not looking up. "Trying to," I said. She nodded, tossed the magazine aside, and poured me a glass of wine. We sat there not talking, just listening to the hum of the house. It was enough. I started exploring Asheville more, walking the streets after my shifts, passing art galleries and bookstores with handwritten signs. One day I stopped at a second-hand shop, the bell jingling as I walked in. A young woman, maybe 20, smiled from behind the counter. "Looking for something special?" she asked. "Something that feels like me," I said. She showed me a navy coat, wool with deep pockets and a subtle pattern. I tried it on and it fit like it was waiting for me. I paid $40 in cash, handed over the bills like they were proof of something. The woman wrapped it in tissue like it was a gift. "You look good," she said. I walked out wearing it, my chin a little higher. Maggie noticed the coat that night as we ate soup from cans. She'd heat it up. "Classy," she said, raising her glass. "Only sometimes," I replied. We laughed, and Franklin swatted at a spoon on the table. The house felt warmer that night, not from the heat, but from the way it held me without asking for anything in return. I went to bed with my notebook under my pillow, the list growing longer. I wasn't running anymore. I was building. Work at corner. Brew cafe became my rhythm, pouring coffee, wiping tables, dodging the morning rush, like it was a dance I'd always known. Claire started trusting me with more, closing the register, restocking sugar packets, even handling the cranky espresso machine that hissed like it had a grudge. I was good at it, faster than I expected, my hands steady, as I filled orders for contractors and nurses who came in bleary-eyed from night shifts. Henry showed up every morning at 9:10 sharp, his gray jacket a fixture at the counter. "You're getting quick," he said one morning, sliding his empty cup toward me. "Practice," I replied, pouring him a refill with cream, no sugar. He left a $5 bill as always, and I tucked it into my apron, feeling like I'd earned something real. After my shift I walked back to Maggie's house, my navy coat warm against the cool Asheville air, my feet sore but proud. Maggie was on the porch with Franklin, the cat sprawled across her lap, a cigarette burning in her hand. "You look settled," she said, exhaling smoke. "Getting there," I said, sitting beside her. She handed me a mug of tea, no questions, just the kind of quiet that let me breathe. Sandra's emails were like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I'd been in Asheville 3 weeks now, and her second message still stung, accusing me of running off like I'd planned it all along. No mention of the airport, no hint of the 8 hours I sat by that fake fern waiting for them to come back. I deleted it, but the words stuck, blaming me for their worry, as if I'd been the one to walk away. I kept my phone off most days, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want to see more of their lies. Sophie's letters were different. A third one came in a creased envelope, her handwriting shakier than before. "Grandma, I'm scared for you. Mom and Dad are fighting more now, saying you're being selfish. I don't believe them. Please call me." Her number was underlined again like a plea. I read it in my room at Maggie's, the air still from the open window, and slipped it into my dresser with the others. I wanted to call, but something stopped me, not fear, just a need to keep this new life untouched by the old one. I added to my notebook, after every shift served 20 customers without a mistake, bought socks with my own money, walked 5 miles in one day. It wasn't much, but it was proof I was more than the woman they'd left behind. Claire noticed I was reliable, started giving me extra hours. "You're better than the kids we usually hire," she said, tossing me a clean rag. I nodded and kept working, my hands moving faster each day. Henry brought me a small gift one morning, a keychain shaped like a tiny bird carved from wood. "Found it at the market," he said, shrugging like it was nothing. "Thought you'd like it." I clipped it to my bag and thanked him, my voice steady but warm. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was close enough to matter. Maggie handed me a flyer one evening as we ate soup from cans. She'd warmed up the kind that tastes like salt but fills you up. Community potluck at the church down the street, she said, tapping the paper with her spoon. Free food and nosy people. You and I laughed, the first real laugh I'd let out in weeks. I'll make lemon bars. She grinned. I'm telling everyone I made them. I spent the next evening baking in her cluttered space, measuring flour and sugar with a precision I hadn't used in years. The lemon bars came out golden, cut into perfect squares, and Maggie snuck one before I could box them up. Not bad, she said, licking crumbs off her fingers. I swatted her hand away and we both laughed. Franklin, darting under the table, like he wanted in on the joke. The potluck was loud and chaotic, tables covered with casseroles, pies, and plastic cups of sweet tea. People talked over each other, their voices bouncing off the church basement walls. A woman with a gray braid and a loud laugh grabbed a lemon bar and took a bite. These are better than Clara's brownies, and that's saying something, she said, pointing at me. I smiled and felt something click, like I was part of this place, not just passing through. Maggie introduced me to a few regulars, a retired librarian named Ellen, and a guy named Terry who used to drive buses. They invited us to a trivia night at the community center. Only if the questions are from the 80s, I said. They laughed, and Terry wrote down the details on a napkin. I tucked it into my pocket, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sandra's third email came during a busy shift at the cafe. I was refilling coffee for a table of construction workers when Claire handed me her phone. Another one. It was shorter this time but sharper, like a knife wrapped in concern. Nancy, we're really worried now. You can't keep doing this to us. Call us, please. No apology, no mention of the lounge or the way Gabriel's pat on my arm felt like a dismissal. I read it once, deleted it, and handed the phone back. Claire watched me, her eyes narrowing. You good? She asked. Good enough, I said, wiping down the counter harder than I needed to. The anger was there, hot and real, but I didn't let it stop me. I poured coffee, took orders, cleared plates, like nothing had happened. I started walking more after work, exploring Asheville's streets, passing bookstores with handwritten signs and galleries with bright paintings in the windows. One afternoon I stopped at a used clothing store, the kind with racks crammed full and a bell that jingled when I walked in. The woman behind the counter, young with a nose ring, smiled at me. Looking for anything specific? She asked. Something that fits who I am now, I said. She pulled out a pair of sturdy brown boots, worn but solid, the kind you could walk miles in. I tried them on, paid $25 in cash, and walked out feeling like I could keep going forever. The boots were heavy, but they grounded me, made every step feel like a choice. Maggie noticed the boots that night, as we sat on her porch. Franklin sprawled between us. You're turning into a local, she said, sipping tea from a chipped mug. Trying to, I replied. She nodded and we sat there listening to the hum of the streetlights coming on. I added to my notebook, before bed, wore new boots, walked 3 miles, didn't look back. It was a small thing, but it felt like laying bricks for a foundation. I wasn't just surviving, I was building something new. Henry started telling longer stories at the cafe about his days fixing cars in a shop outside town, how he'd once rebuilt an engine in a single weekend. Crows used to steal my bolts, he said one morning, his eyes crinkling. Smart little bastards. I laughed and poured him another coffee, no charge. Claire saw but didn't say anything, just handed me a stack of napkins to restock. The cafe was busy now, the morning rush stretching into noon, but I kept up, moving from table to counter without missing a beat. My paycheck grew a little, $92.15 this time, and I cashed it at the bank with Mari the teller, who smiled like she knew me. You're sticking around, huh? She said, counting out the bills. Looks like it, I said, tucking the cash into my wallet. Sophie's fourth letter came in a thin envelope, her handwriting steadier now, like she'd taken her time. Grandma, I'm not giving up. Mom and Dad are acting like you did something wrong, but I know better. I miss you. Please call. I read it standing in Maggie's hallway, the air thick with the smell of her burnt toast. I folded it carefully and added it to my dresser drawer, the stack of letters growing heavier. I dialed her number that night, my finger hovering over the call button, but I hung up before it rang. I wasn't ready, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed this life to feel solid before letting anyone from the old one in. Maggie handed me another flyer one evening as we ate chili from cans. Trivia night's coming up, she said. You still in? I nodded. Only if I can bring more lemon bars. She laughed. Deal. I spent the next evening baking again, the routine grounding me like the work at the cafe. The trivia night was at a community center, a low building with folding chairs and a buzzing fluorescent light. Ellen and Terry were there waving me over to their table. We didn't win, but we came close, laughing over questions about old television shows and music I hadn't thought about in years. I left with a smile, my boots heavy on the floor, feeling like I belonged. Sandra's fourth email came right after trivia night. I was wiping down tables at the cafe when Claire handed me her phone. They don't quit, do they? She said. This one was different, colder, like they'd run out of fake worry. Nancy, this has gone too far. We're family. You need to call us now. No mention of the airport, no acknowledgement of what they'd done, just a demand dressed up as concern. I deleted it and handed the phone back, my hand steady, as I cleared a table. Claire didn't ask, but she slid a blueberry muffin across the counter when my shift ended. Take it, she said. I nodded, grateful for the gesture. I added to my notebook that night, worked a full shift without a mistake, joined a trivia team, bought boots that fit. It was a list of small wins, but they added up. Maggie was in the living room when I got home, flipping through a magazine with Franklin curled up beside her. You're getting loud, she said, not looking up. Good loud or bad loud? I asked. She smirked. Good. We sat there drinking tea, not talking, just letting the house hum around us. I went to bed with my boots by the door, my coat on a hook, my notebook under my pillow. I wasn't the woman left in an airport lounge anymore. I was someone new, and I was just getting started. I was wiping down tables at Corner Brew Cafe when Claire handed me a letter from the bank in Phoenix, the envelope plain but heavy, like it carried bad news. I stuffed it into my apron pocket, not ready to open it in the middle of a shift, and kept working, pouring coffee for the morning crowd of contractors and nurses. The cafe was loud, plates, clinking, orders shouted, but I moved fast, keeping up with the rush, my hands steady, as I refilled cups and cleared crumbs. Henry sat at the counter, as always, his gray jacket slung over the stool, sipping his coffee with cream. You look distracted, he said, sliding his empty cup toward me. Got a lot on my mind, I replied, pouring him a refill. He nodded, left a $5 bill and didn't push. I liked that about him, no questions, just presence. After my shift, I walked back to Maggie's house, my navy coat warm against the cool air, my boots heavy but solid on the pavement. Maggie was in the living room flipping through a magazine. Franklin, the cat, sprawled across her lap. Mail for you, she said, tossing the bank letter onto the table. I sat down, opened it, and felt my stomach twist. Someone had tried accessing my secret account, the one I'd kept hidden since before Sandra's wedding. Gabriel's name was listed in the inquiry, 3 attempts in the past week. They weren't just ignoring me, they were digging into my money. I'd been in Asheville 6 weeks now, building a life from nothing, working mornings at the cafe, eating with Maggie, joining potlucks and trivia nights with people who didn't know my past. Sandra's emails had kept coming, each one colder, accusing me of selfishness for leaving without a word, never mentioning the 8 hours I waited in that airport lounge. Sophie's letters were the opposite, 4 now stacked in my dresser drawer, her words full of worry and care. Grandma, I miss you, please call. She'd written in the last one, her number underlined like a promise. I hadn't called, but I kept her letters closed like they were proof someone still saw me. The bank letter changed everything. It wasn't just Gabriel's name, it was the details he'd asked about a savings account worth $10,000 and a plot of land in Phoenix. My husband David left me worth $50,000. I'd kept them secret for years, a safety net Sandra and Gabriel never knew about. Now it made sense. Their silence, their fake concern, the way Sandra's emails demanded I call like I owed them something. I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket, not ready to tell Maggie but needing to do something. I walked to the bank on Main Street, the one where Mari the teller cashed my paychecks. Can you lock my account? I asked, handing her the account number. She typed for a moment, her purple nail polish catching the light. Someone's been poking around, she said, glancing at the screen. 3 calls from a Gabriel Reed asking for access. I nodded. Make sure nobody gets in without my signature. She printed a form. I signed it with a steady hand and walked out with a copy, feeling like I'd drawn a line they couldn't cross. Back at Maggie's, I added to my notebook, locked my account, kept my money safe, took control. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Claire gave me extra shifts that week, trusting me to handle the busy hours alone. I was good at it now, moving from table to counter without missing a beat, my boots scuffing the floor as I carried trays of coffee and muffins. Henry lingered longer each morning, telling stories about fixing cars in his old shop, how he'd once rebuilt a truck in 2 days. "Crows stole my tools," he said, grinning. "Smart little thieves." I laughed and poured him another coffee, no charge. "You're spoiling me," he said. "Only sometimes," I replied. Claire saw but didn't comment, just handed me a stack of napkins to restock. The cafe was my place now, the regulars' faces familiar, their orders second nature. My paycheck was $98.42 this time, and I cashed it at the bank, tucking the bills into my envelope with the rest. Maggie invited me to another potluck, this one at a community center with long tables and plastic chairs. I baked lemon bars again, cutting them into neat squares, while Maggie snuck one before I could box them up. "You're gonna make me fat," she said, licking crumbs off her fingers. "You'll survive," I replied, swatting her hand away. We laughed, and Franklin darted under the table like he wanted a piece. At the potluck, people crowded around the food, talking loud over paper plates. Ellen, the librarian, grabbed a lemon bar and winked. "You're raising the bar around here," she said. I smiled, and felt like I belonged not just to the moment but to this life. I was building step by step. Sandra's 5th email came during a lunch rush. I was clearing plates when Claire handed me her phone. Her eyebrow raised. "They're persistent." I opened it and felt the anger flare hot and sharp. "Nancy, this is ridiculous. You're tearing our family apart. Call us now, or we'll have to take steps." No mention of the airport, no apology, just a threat wrapped in concern. I deleted it, handed the phone back, and went back to work, wiping tables harder than I needed to. Claire watched but didn't ask, just slid a blueberry muffin across the counter when my shift ended. "Eat," she said. I took it and nodded, grateful for the quiet support. Then Nathan Brooks walked into the cafe. I was untying my apron at the end of a shift when he stepped in, a man in a crisp suit too clean for Asheville's dusty streets. He waited until I was done, then approached, his voice smooth but careful. "Nancy Carter, I'm Nathan Brooks, representing Sandra and Gabriel Reed. They're concerned about your well-being." I folded my apron, slow and deliberate, staring him down. "My well-being's fine. What do they want?" He shifted, his briefcase heavy in his hand. "They want to ensure you're safe, discuss your assets, maybe some next steps." I laughed loud enough for Henry to look up from his coffee. "Assets, you mean the land in Phoenix and the savings they're sniffing around?" Nathan blinked, caught off guard. "They're worried you're vulnerable," he said. "Tell Sandra and Gabriel, I'm not their lost luggage. They left me at the airport. There's nothing to discuss." I walked out, leaving him standing there, his suit out of place in the cafe's warmth. I went straight to Maggie's, sat on the porch with a mug of tea, Franklin curled up beside me. Maggie joined me, her cigarette glowing in the dim light. "Trouble?" she asked. "Family," I said. She nodded, exhaling smoke. "They always show up when they want something." I didn't tell her about the land or the savings, but she didn't need to know. She got it. I added to my notebook that night, faced a lawyer, kept my ground, didn't back down. It was a small win, but it felt like a wall between me and them. Sophie called the next evening. I was counting tips at the cafe, my apron off when my phone buzzed, her name lighting up the screen. I answered before I could think twice. "Grandma." Her voice was small but clear, like she'd been holding her breath. "I'm here, Sophie." "You're okay, better than okay." We talked for 10 minutes about her job at a bookstore, about Asheville's quirky streets, about nothing and everything. "Mom and Dad are mad," she said. "They think you're hiding something." I paused, the bank letter flashing in my mind. "They're the ones hiding," I said. She didn't ask what I meant, just said, "I miss you," and I believed her. "I miss you too," I replied. It was enough for now, no explanations, just a thread connecting us. I wrote to the bank again, instructing them to freeze my account and the land's title, no access without my signature in person. I mailed it with a stamp showing a mountain view, the kind that reminded me why I'd chosen Asheville. The land was mine, the savings were mine, and they weren't getting a penny. I went back to work the next shift, my boots steady on the cafe floor, my hands quick with the coffee pot. Claire handed me a new schedule scribbled on a napkin. "You're on weekends now too," she said. "You're too good to waste." I nodded, tucked the napkin into my pocket, and kept moving. Maggie and I went to trivia night again, with Ellen and Terry. We lost, but laughed through questions about old movies and music I hadn't heard in decades. I brought lemon bars, and they disappeared fast, Terry grabbing 2 before the game started. "Your trouble," he said, grinning. "Only the good kind," I replied. The room was loud with chatter and clinking glasses, but it felt like home. I added to my notebook after Baked for Friends held my own, didn't let them win. Each line was a brick in the life I was building. Sandra's 6th email came right after trivia. I was wiping down tables when Claire handed me her phone, her voice dry. "They don't give up." This one was blunt, no pretense of worry. "Nancy, we need to talk about your finances. This isn't just about you. Call us." I read it once, deleted it, and handed the phone back. The word finances stuck like a burr, confirming what the bank letter and Nathan's visit had already told me. They wanted the land, the savings, everything I'd kept for myself. I didn't respond, didn't need to. I was done playing their game. Henry brought me another small gift, a magnet shaped like a book he'd found at a flea market. "For your collection," he said, sliding it across the counter. I thanked him and stuck it on Maggie's fridge next to Sophie's letters. It wasn't much, but it was proof I was here living, not just surviving. Maggie saw it that night as we ate chili from cans. "You're getting popular," she said, smirking. "Just lucky," I replied. We laughed and Franklin swatted at a spoon on the table. I went to bed with my notebook heavier, now the pages filling up with things I'd done, not things I'd felt. I wasn't the woman they'd left in Phoenix anymore. I was someone who fought back. I was pouring coffee at Corner Brew Cafe when Sophie called again, her name lighting up my phone screen as I wiped down the counter. I answered right away, my apron still tied from a busy morning rush. "Grandma, I'm coming to Asheville," she said, her voice steady, but soft like she wasn't sure I'd agree. "I'm at the Red Fern Motel on Maple, room 12. Can I see you?" I paused only for a second, the weight of her words hitting me hard. "I'll be there," I said. I finished my shift moving fast through orders for contractors and tourists, my boots scuffing the floor as I carried trays of muffins and coffee. Claire noticed me checking my phone more than usual, but didn't comment, just handed me a clean rag to restock sugar packets. Henry was at the counter, his gray jacket slung over the stool, sipping his usual coffee with cream. "You're moving quick today," he said, sliding his empty cup toward me. "Got somewhere to be," I replied, pouring him a refill. He left a $5 bill as always, and I tucked it into my apron, feeling like I was running towards something, not away. I walked to the Red Fern Motel after my shift, my navy coat warm against the cool Asheville air, my boots steady on the pavement. The motel was plain clean but worn with a flickering sign out front. I knocked on room 12's door and Sophie opened it, her eyes tired but bright like she'd been waiting for me. She hugged me tight, her arms strong around my shoulders. "I found you," she said, her voice muffled against my coat. "You did," I replied, holding her back. We sat in her room, the air smelling of takeout and cheap soap, a backpack on the floor, books scattered on the desk, mostly poetry. "I underlined some for you," she said, handing me a worn paperback with dog-eared pages. I flipped through it later, finding lines about women who rebuild from nothing, and they fit like my boots. We talked for hours about her job at a bookstore, about Asheville's quirky streets, about how she felt caught between her parents and me. "Mom and Dad are fighting all the time," she said, picking at a thread on her sleeve. "About you, about money, about everything." I nodded, the bank letter and Nathan's visit still fresh in my mind. "They want the land in Phoenix, don't they?" I asked. Her eyes widened like I'd caught her off guard. "How did you know bank called?" "Lawyer showed up." She looked down her fingers, twisting the sleeve. "I didn't know they'd go that far." I believed her, because Sophie never lied, not to me. I made a decision right then, not because she asked, but because she didn't. The land worth $50,000 in the savings, $10,000 would go to her, not Sandra, not Gabriel. I called a lawyer the next day, a woman Maggie recommended named Laura, who worked out of a small office near the bank. I walked in with my account details, and the land's title, my hands steady as I laid them out. "I want to transfer everything to my granddaughter Sophie when she turns 25, I said. Laura nodded, her glasses slipping down her nose. "You sure about this?" "Never been surer." We spent an hour drafting papers, making it official. The land and savings would be Sophie's, locked until she was ready. I signed every page, my signature bold and clear, then walked out with a copy, feeling like I'd taken back something they couldn't touch. I added to my notebook that night, gave Sophie the future, kept it from them, built something lasting. Sandra's 7th email came during a lunch rush at the cafe. I was clearing plates when Claire handed me her phone, her voice dry. "They're relentless." It was short, no pretense left. "Nancy, we know about the land. You can't keep this from us. Call now or we'll take action." No mention of the airport, no apology, just a demand as blunt as a fist. I deleted it, handed the phone back, and went back to work, pouring coffee like nothing had happened. Claire watched, but didn't ask, just slid a blueberry muffin across the counter when my shift ended. "Eat something," she said. I took it and nodded, grateful for the quiet support. I went to Maggie's after work, sat on the porch, with a mug of tea, Franklin curled up beside me. Maggie joined me, her cigarette glowing in the dim light. "Family still chasing you?" she asked, exhaling smoke. "Trying to," I said. She nodded, didn't press. "You're tougher than they think," she said. I smiled, added to my notebook, didn't let them scare me, held my ground, stayed free. The words were small, but they stacked up like bricks in a wall I was building around this new life. Sophie stayed in Asheville for 2 days. We met again at the motel, sitting on the bed with takeout pizza from a place down the street. She didn't ask about the land, or the money, didn't hint at wanting anything. "I just wanted to see you," she said, biting into a slice. "You're the only one who ever listened." I nodded, my throat tight, but I didn't let it show, just passed her a napkin. Before she left, she handed me a small gift, a bookmark with a pressed flower tucked into her poetry book. "For your reading," she said. I hugged her in the motel lobby, the vacuum cleaner humming in the background, her arms holding me like I was something solid. "Be good to yourself," I said. "You too," she replied. She left on a train, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and I walked back to Maggie's, my boots heavy but sure. Claire gave me a new apron at the cafe, green with "Not Your Grandma's Cafe" stitched in white. "Found it cheap," she said, tossing it to me. I laughed loud enough for Henry to look up from his coffee. "Nice style," he said, raising his mug. I tied it on and kept working, my hands quick with the coffee pot, my feet steady in my boots. My paycheck was $103.71 this time, and I cashed it at the bank with Mari, who smiled as she counted out the bills. "You're a regular now," she said. "Guess so," I replied, tucking the cash into my wallet. Maggie and I went to another trivia night with Ellen and Terry, the community center buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. I brought lemon bars again and they disappeared before the first round ended, Terry grabbing 3 with a grin. "You're dangerous," he said. "Only with baked goods," I replied. We didn't win, but we laughed through questions about old songs and movies I hadn't thought about in years. I added to my notebook, "After baked for friends," laughed hard, stayed connected. Each line was a step further from the woman left in that airport lounge. Sandra's 8th email came right after trivia. I was wiping down tables when Claire handed me her phone, her eyebrow raised. "Last one, I hope." It was long, full of accusations and fake hurt. "Nancy, you're breaking our family. We know about the land and the money. You can't do this to us. Call now or we'll have to act." No mention of the 8 hours I waited, no acknowledgement of their lawyer's visit, just a demand for what was mine. I deleted it without a second read, handed the phone back and cleared a table, my hands steady as I stacked plates. Claire slid another muffin across the counter. "You're tough," she said. "Had to be," I replied. I wrote a letter to Laura, the lawyer, confirming the transfer to Sophie, no changes, no loopholes. I mailed it with a stamp, showing a bird, a finch that sang even in the cold. I didn't write to Sandra, or Gabriel didn't need to. They'd made their choice in Phoenix, and I'd made mine here. I added to my notebook, sent the papers, cut them off, chose my family. Sophie was my family now, the only one who saw me, not as a bank account or a burden, but as me. Henry brought me another gift, a small magnet shaped like a book from a flea market. "For your fridge," he said, sliding it across the counter. I thanked him, and stuck it next to Sophie's bookmark on Maggie's fridge. It was small, but it was proof I was here living, not just passing through. Maggie saw it that night as we ate soup from cans. "You're collecting a museum," she said, smirking. "Just the good stuff," I replied. We laughed, and Franklin swatted at a spoon on the table. I wrote one last thing in my notebook, sitting on my bed, the window open letting in the cool air. It wasn't for Sandra or Gabriel, not even for Sophie, but for me. You waited years for someone to see you, but you were the one holding the key. They let go, and you let go back. Look at the life you built. Keep going. I taped it inside my dresser drawer next to Sophie's letters and my old paperback. It was a quiet promise, but it was enough. Work kept me steady, my boots scuffing the cafe floor, my hands quick with orders. Claire started letting me open the cafe alone, trusting me with the keys. Henry came every morning, his stories longer now about fixing cars and outsmarting crows. Maggie and I ate together most nights, chili or soup or whatever was cheap, sharing stories about nothing and everything. Sophie called once a week, her voice a thread tying me to the past without pulling me back. I didn't check for Sandra's emails anymore, didn't need to. Asheville was my home, now the cafe, the streets, Maggie's porch, all mine. I wasn't the woman left in an airport lounge. I was a woman with a job, a place, a life I'd built from nothing. And it was more than enough.